Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Well, we had our plan, and Krishna had his plan, and guess who won? We, this morning, we were at Porbandar, the place of Sudama, and we almost, but didn't quite finish the discussion about Sudama. So the concluding text of the whole section of Srimad Bhagavatam, it starts with chapter 80, it goes to 81. The verse says, Sudama realized how kind Lord Krishna was to him, and he was always in trance, constantly thinking of Krishna. By such constant association with Krishna, whatever darkness of material contamination contained within his heart was completely cleared. And very shortly he was transferred to the spiritual kingdom, which is the goal of all saintly persons on the perfectional stage of life, or in the perfectional stage of life. No surprise he went back to Godhead. But Krishna was engaging his devotee and honoring his devotee to help instruct us on the path of devotional service. The path of devotional service is the way to Krishna. And there's some qualifications to become properly situated on the path to Krishna. And Sudama had those qualifications, as did Maharaj Parikshit. He was absorbed in Krishna Tattva. Through the medium of his devotion to Krishna, of course, he had some special mercy. He had Krishna's association as a small boy and enjoying exchanges of loving service to their spiritual master together, even as a young boy. So attachment to Krishna led him to attraction for hearing more about Krishna and realizing that which he heard as he heard more about Krishna. And progressively, realization of Krishna led to detachment from anything else other than Krishna. Here we're hearing at the end, this constant remembrance of Krishna led to perfection and back to Godhead. So the importance of remembering Krishna. So repeating some points from earlier discussion, remembrance goes to what you're attached to. Your thoughts go to that which you're attached to. Where are your thoughts going at the moment? Wherever you're attached to, that's where your thoughts go. And it kind of flickers. Actually, the concluding verse, Shukadeva Goswami speaks. All persons who hear this history of Sudama, Vipra, and Lord Krishna will know how affectionate Lord Krishna is to the Brahmana devotees like Sudama. Therefore, anyone who hears this history gradually becomes as qualified as Sudama, Vipra, and he is thus transferred to the spiritual kingdom of Lord Krishna. So the benefit of hearing is not a mechanical hearing, it's a devotional hearing where the message is heard from the heart, and it enters the heart, and it moves the heart, and it helps inspire us to be like, following in the footsteps of, not imitating, but becoming inspired by the qualities of such exalted devotees as Sudama. The Puranas work in such a way that they give examples in history of teachings found within the teaching portion of the scripture. So Sudama's life exemplifies the teachings of becoming attached to Krishna, detached from matter, through the medium of devotion. And by the benediction of Shukadeva Goswami is, by hearing this, we can become similarly qualified. What we also didn't speak about was, well, two other things. Sudama in Gaura Lila. Sudama Brahma in Gaura Lila is spoken of differently in two different places. One is by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Navadvip Dham Mahatmya. He says the house of Kolavichar Sridhar is actually the house of Sudama. Similarly, very meager, insignificant in its opulence, yet all attractive to the personality of Godhead. Krishna in the case of Sudama, and Lord Chaitanya in case of Kolavichar Sridhar. In another place in Chaitanya Bhagavat, a brahmachari of the name Suklambar brahmachari is understood to be the same as Sudama. Suklambar brahmachari was similarly, materially speaking, impoverished. He wasn't a learned Vipra, but he was a simple brahmachari, and he maintained himself carrying a small bag, and whatever people would offer to him would go into the bag, and that would be his sustenance. And it was very meager, but he didn't feel any inconvenience at all. Even when people would ridicule him for being a beggar, he didn't become disturbed, because he was absorbed in devotion to the personality of Godhead. So Chaitanya Bhagavat describes that one time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was seated, not dancing in kirtan, but in this occasion seated in a mood of the opulent Supreme Lord. And there was a kirtan going on, and Suklambar Brahmachari, hearing the kirtan, was drawn to the sound of the kirtan, entered into the kirtan, and started dancing and dancing and dancing ecstatically. Lord Chaitanya was observing all of this. Lord Chaitanya stood up and approached Suklambar Brahmachari and grabbed his bag and started eating from his bag, and Suklambar fell at Lord Chaitanya's feet. His ecstasy was gone, and he was devastated. I'm making an offense to you, the best of Brahmanas. I will be destroyed. And Lord Chaitanya said, you've purchased me by your devotion, and that's what's satisfying to me, not something very opulent given by a prideful person. Your humility and your devotion is what I'm eating. and fully satisfied. So, those of you that are not familiar with this, all of the associates of Krishna having a particular love in their relationship with Krishna similarly have their counterparts in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. And it's the same bhav, the same transcendental love and emotion or devotion or motion of devotion in their exchange with Krishna or the exchange with Lord Chaitanya. Same. The setting is different and the names are different, but the ecstasy is the same. Something we also didn't discuss while we were in Porbandar is that's the birthplace of Mahatma Gandhi. And they have a, whatever you want to call it, a shrine or a place in honor of Mahatma Gandhi, a great soul in India, the recent history of India. And we have heard different things spoken by Srila Prabhupada about Mahatma Gandhi. And he had, interestingly, both moods of appreciation and moods of sharp criticism. Now, to give sharp criticism of Gandhi in India is like, you can't do that. But Prabhupada being Prabhupada, he did that, but then when saying, whoa, how can you speak like that, he would explain and people would understand why. So there's a nice explanation in the one of those books that Satsrup Maharaj wrote that's interviewing disciples of Prabhupada. I'll not mention the name purposefully. But one devotee was present in Vrindavan. Some of you may be familiar. There were a series of morning walks in Vrindavan, now very famous, and then actually also very famous, very well known, where Prabhupada is speaking very strongly about varnashram, the necessity for organizing society. And the devotees were saying, well, worldly society or devotee society or both. And Prabhupada was being quite clear, both, which was very surprising because in his writings he would say, it's not possible in this age of Kali to follow varnashram, therefore we have Yuga Dharma, Sankirtan. So anyway, without going into all of that, Prabhupada had been in Vrindavan and had been speaking on this every morning on his morning walks. Then he shifted to Juhu, and this one devotee was seated with Prabhupada in Prabhupada's room. It was a room conversation. And Prabhupada, for some reason, began speaking about Gandhi. And the reason he was speaking about Gandhi is it had some relationship with the Varnashram discussions in Vrindavan, where Prabhupada was giving some, not what he would speak in a Bhagavatam class, but he was speaking in a confidential setting like a room conversation. That basically Prabhupada was saying Gandhi had the right idea. His idea was, after liberation from the British rule, he very much wanted to establish self-sufficient communities of people that would live from the land and support themselves and not to be dependent upon imported things from the West and try to compete with the West. So those who became the elected officials following India's independence, Nehru and some other fellow, they rejected Gandhi's idea and they went for industrialization immediately, bringing in foreign money and using their local money and building industry and competing with the West, using the resources of India for that purpose. And Prabhupada was shaking his head saying, they've spoiled India. And saying basically, Gandhi had the right idea. He really cared about his country. Speaking in words of appreciation like that, this devotee's comment, he was very surprised to hear Prabhupada speaking like that, because he had heard other things Prabhupada saying. Then, that was an afternoon conversation. The morning walk, the next morning, for some reason Prabhupada walked an extra long length along the beach in Juhu, and when just before he turned around, he stopped and offered his pranams to what looked like nobody, because there was nobody standing next to him. So the devotee looked, and at a distance there was a statue of Gandhi walking with his cane and doing, the Gandhi pose, which was similar to the afternoon conversation, Prabhupada's appreciation of what he wanted for the organization of society now that India had its independence. And then the walk turned around and someone brought up the topic of Gandhi, and Prabhupada started speaking very harshly about Gandhi. So both of these things are in his heart, in other words. And the people were astonished, how can you say something harsh about Gandhi? And Prabhupada repeated, that he didn't believe that Krishna was a person. Now, I personally had this experience. I heard of Gandhi as a figure, but I never read anything that he wrote. But one time, it's anecdotal, but I was staying in someone's home after a home program somewhere, I don't remember where, and I purposely got up very early so I could chant my rounds early and not, be disturbed by expectations from the family. And I finished my chanting, so I saw this big library. I looked at the binding on the back of the books and saw Gandhi's commentary on Bhagavad Gita. I was curious, pulled the book off the shelf, opened it up. At random, the page that I opened to was Gandhi and his commentary in Bhagavad Gita saying, there was no Krishna, there was no Kurukshetra battle, and if I'm, as a Hindu, supposed to accept that there was a Krishna and a Kurukshetra battle, then I give up my Hinduism. I closed the book, put it back on the shelf. And I went and read the Bhagavatam. Then I was curious, maybe I misread it. So I went and took the book down and read it again. And there's a number of passages that are explicitly impersonal. Explicitly impersonal. Although at other times Prabhupada encouraged Gandhi, now that India has its independence, you should teach Bhagavad Gita all over the world, and people will learn the message of Bhagavad Gita all over the world. And as we know, Prabhupada said he never replied, because he was too much interested in politics. That's where his mind went, what he was attached to. He was not attached to Krishna. He was influenced by other ideas. And so, without the, there's very interesting anecdotal examples, but I don't know if I'll take the time to go through them. Particularly conversations in the Juhu morning walks with Dr. Patel. Those of you who are familiar with the morning walk, he was like a self-appointed punching bag. He would make arguments against things, and Prabhupada would defeat those arguments against things. The next morning he'd come up with another set of arguments, and Prabhupada would defeat those arguments. And they had a very nice, loving dealing, but Prabhupada was insisting that he stick to Vaishnava principles. And so one of those discussions had to do with speaking of Gandhi as being attached, an attached householder. And that was, you don't do that in India. Besides the fact that his reputation was he gave up his wife and entered into a detached state of life in order for, a higher cause kind of idea. But Prabhupada explained, whether you think that you're this body or the extended body in terms of community, nation, it's all on the platform of the body. So it's a platform of attachment. The whole principle of us and them on the platform of the body is animal life. What's the difference? Oh. Okay. So Prabhupada was bold and fearless, and the basis of what he spoke was on the basis of Scripture. On the basis of Scripture, one who doesn't accept the soul as the real self, but the body as the real self, and whether it's whatever the form it takes, without that basic spiritual conception, how can it be spiritual? And without accepting the personality of Godhead and shelter at the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, how can that be spiritual? So he was strong in that regard, in relation to Gandhi. At the same time, some of the same ideals that Gandhi spoke, Prabhupada spoke, in terms of varnashram, but Daivi varnashram, as the means of social organization and economy. Long discussion about, for example, one of those Vrindavan talks was about Varnashram College. Varnashram College, and the devotees on the morning walk were asking all kinds of questions. What subject matters? What age groups? Did they have to be devotees? Would it be an ashram school or a home school? A commuting school to go to the school, and what subjects would be taught, and details and details. But the economic principle that Prabhupada was promoting was the same that Gandhi was promoting. And without this, then we'll have artificial life. And people will struggle, thinking of people that I know that are struggling, because of the foundation is artificial life. And then one becomes dependent on that standard of artificial life, and there's some disturbance in the standard of artificial life, and that becomes a problem, and so forth and so on. Somebody loses their job and they're on the street. We go look for another job, and anyway, some of you have been through that, and it's not nice. Anyway, if the further one departs from the Vedic model, in short, the more there's disturbance in society, in individual, family, community, nation, and any other standard you want to go to. So that's Mahatma Gandhi's birthplace, Porbandar. Last thing on Mahatma Gandhi, something that I've grown to appreciate very much. Prabhupada was a follower of Gandhi before he met Bhaktisiddhanta. And even after becoming a follower of Bhaktisiddhanta, Prabhupada was requested at the Gandhi Memorial to speak something. Like, I don't know if it was the keynote speaker, but a main speech at the memorial for Mahatma Gandhi. So Prabhupada wrote a document which later was found, has now become called the Gita Prophecy, where he speaks the way to honor a great person is not to build a statue of that person, put in the public place, and birds come and pass stool on the head of the statue. Or name a street after that person, or name a building after that person that later crumbles. The way to honor a great person is to establish community of people that exemplify the teachings of that great personality. That's the way to honor a great person. You consider him great, his ideas are great. Let his ideas become manifest in real time, in real life, in real action. So then he began describing. Mahatma Gandhi was an ardent appreciator of Bhagavad Gita. He carried it with him everywhere of his few possessions, and he read Bhagavad Gita daily. And so that place that exemplifies Gandhi's values is Bhagavad Gita. So then he named that place where the teachings of Gita would be lived as Gita Nagari. Then he described what would go into Gita Nagari. And it's particularly significant for me because one part of my life in Krishna consciousness was following a particular instruction that Prabhupada gave, which was when temples become well established in ISKCON, they should purchase rural land and develop the ideal of the teachings in the Bhagavatam, simple living, high thinking. So I was part of the group of devotees that through sale of books we raised funds to buy a farm. And then somebody had the bright idea to buy a farm that's 4.5 hours away from the temple. Great farmland, but it's not at all practical, but that's what happened. And it became known as the New York Farm. The New York Farm. The same corporation that owned the New York Temple owned the New York Farm. It was the New York Farm. Then, during Prabhupada's life in 1976, he came to New York and then wanted to go visit the New York Farm, and he gave it the name Gita Nagari. We didn't know about this other publication at that time. When it was found, and Prabhupada used the name Gita Nagari, then the name changed to Gita Nagari. And then in 1977, when Prabhupada wanted to come back to the West and do 3 things, one of which was demonstrate how to perform Varnashram, how to establish it, he chose Gita Nagari Farm to do that. And again, many of the ideas are quite similar, of course, Daivi Varnashram, but ideas of Mahatma Gandhi. So he had that appreciation and some other kinds of views about what Gandhi did. He quoted Gandhi. He said, I heard it from him directly. Quit India, quit India. He said, it's like a barking dog. Woof, 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 woof. And they said, well, that isn't what he meant. He meant something else. Prabhupada said, I heard it with my own ears. He said, quit India to the British. And on the platform of the body, the bodily conception, I'm Indian, they're British, go away, woof woof. What's the difference between an animal dog and an animal human saying woof woof? He's strong about this. So, some appreciation and some other words. Not so happy. He changed so many things. He made up so many things. He used the name Bhagavad Gita, but it was his own idea. Where does Krishna in Bhagavad Gita speak nonviolence? And that's his whole platform. Bhagavad Gita speaks nonviolence. So then we made our way here to the cave of Jambavan. And maybe some of you have seen over there, little tiny entrance into the cave of Jambavan. And I don't advise you all try to go running over there when we're done and I'll get stuck in the cave as some people are trying to get in and others want to get out and somebody gets claustrophobia and has a panic attack and they got to get out. But there's two caves down inside. One goes all the way back to Dwaraka, big cave. And another one goes this way to where we're going next, and it's 3 hours away by car. Big cave. It's like the A train in New York City isn't that big. And that's where Krishna recovered the Shamantaka jewel and took the Shamantaka jewel back to show the residents in Dwaraka that he didn't kill Prasenna. So a little bit about the life of Jambavan. Jambavan is in the category of Chiran Jiva. Jiva means living entity, and Chiran means he lives for a long time. He lives for a really long time. And according to Srimad Bhagavatam, the firstborn living being is Lord Brahma. And the first living entities produced by Lord Brahma are the four Kumaras, and then Lord Shiva, and then Swayambhuvamana and Shatarupa, and then the 10 sages, and then it becomes 11 somehow. That's the Bhagavatam description. There's other descriptions, one of them found in Mahabharata, in 2 different sections, Shanti Parva and another, that describes the life of Jambavan. Vanaparva and Shanti Parva. And the description there, Mahabharata description, goes like this. From the lotus navel of Garbhodakshay Vishnu, a lotus flower sprouted. Lord Brahma appeared on top of that lotus flower. After some exchanges with Lord Vishnu, he begins tapa, meditation. While he's engaged in meditation, Mahabharata describes, there were 2 drops on the lotus stem upon which the lotus flower of Lord Brahma was manifest. And Lord Vishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, glanced at those 2 drops. One looked like honey, and the other was very thick. And by the Lord's glance, 2 demons were born, Madhu and Kaitaba. At least as far as this narration, it doesn't mention the chronology, when did the 4 Kumaras appear, etc., but it mentions these. Madhu and Kaitaba underwent austerity and penance for thousands of years. Goddess of fortune Lakshmi became very pleased with them. She came before them and offered them a benediction that they did not need to die unless they chose to die. Now, who chooses to die, right? So they were very happy. They looked up and they saw this effulgent being, and it was Lord Brahma, and they saw that Lord Brahma was engaged also in meditation, and from his mouths the Vedas were being emanated, and they rubbed their hands together and grabbed the Vedas and disappeared. They were very powerful, so Brahma was unable to do anything to stop them. So what did Brahma do? He went to Lord Vishnu, his father, and said, "Help, can you get the Vedas back, please?" So Lord Vishnu then assumed a form of Hayagriva. Now this is described in the Bhagavatam, just this part. Hayagriva killed Madhu and Kaitaba, it's mentioned. So Hayagriva went into the region where Madhu and Kaitaba had gone, at the very bottom in Patala Loka. And when he saw them from a distance with the Vedas, he then, from his mouth, vibrated the sound of Vedic hymns. And Madhu and Kaitava were attracted by that very interesting sound vibration. They left the Vedas to search out the source of that sound vibration. Hayagriva then went to where they had left the Vedas, brought the Vedas and returned them to Lord Brahma. There's some versions that say he just re-manifested them again because he has that capacity. When Madhu and Kaitava could not find the source of that, this is Mahabharata, they couldn't find the source of that sound, they went back to where they had been in Patalaloka, and the 4 Vedas were missing. They stole the Vedas, and someone stole the Vedas from them. They didn't know who. They went searching, they went back and saw Lord Vishnu reclining in Yoga Nidra. They didn't know what Yoga Nidra was. But they started insulting the Lord. And he awoke and he could understand their spirit. They were looking for a fight. And so he prepared himself for a fight with the 2 demons who were given the benediction by Lakshmi that didn't need to die unless they wanted to. So it was a long battle. And one of them fought while the other one rested until the one that was fighting became fatigued, and then the other one took his turn, and it went on, according to Mahabharata, for thousands of years. Then clever Lord Vishnu expressed the following clever idea. My dear Madhu and Kaitava, you're very strong and very, very difficult to defeat. And the strength that you have is from the benediction given to you by my goddess of fortune, and so I make the following request of you. As she has given a benediction to you, I request you to give a benediction to me. And they said, sure. He said, my benediction I'd like is you choose to die. And they said, well, we've never gone against our word, and so we'll have to keep our word, but we'll just make a condition that you wish to kill me, but you'll have to kill me where there's no open space. But all there was open space. There wasn't anything but open space. This is the beginning of creation. So Lord Vishnu said, well, my thighs, I can close my thighs, and so he extended his thighs, put them on his thighs, and ripped them in pieces. Thus, Madhusudana, killed by Hayagriva. So while this battle was going on, there was some perspiration coming on the cheek of Brahma because it was getting all hot. And that perspiration started to move, and it started to grow, and it manifested as Jambavan. And Jambavan was witnessing the battle between Hayagriva and Madhu and Kaitava, and he was cheering it on. Yeah, you got him, a good one. Like the cheering gallery. So when the battle was over, he requested Lord Vishnu, this was so wonderful, may I see your other pastimes in the same way. So he granted him that benediction. And so the Puranic literature describe, it's in the Bhagavatam specifically, for example, he was there for Vamana's defeating of Bali. When he manifested this gigantic form and the 3rd step was placed on his head, Jambavan was there. In fact, it says Jambavan circumambulated Vamana in this giant form 8 times. In Ramayana, one of the Ramayans, it says 21 times. He was present at the time of Vamana's appearance. He was present at the time of Hiranyaksha. He saw Lord Varaha smash him with his hoof. He was there for the destruction of Lord Nrsingadev. Obviously, he was there in the pastimes of Ramachandra. He not only witnessed, but he took part in the pastimes with Lord Ramachandra. Present in the pastimes with Krishna, here at the cave of Jambavan. So a very special personality, Jambavan. And his witness of the experience of Hayagriva or Madhusudana killing the Madhu and Kaitaba demon is mentioned by King Kulashekar in his prayers. It's mentioned by Prahlad twice in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. Here's Prahlad's prayer, 7th canto. My dear Lord, when you appeared as Hayagriva with the head of a horse, you killed the two demons known as Madhu and Kaitaba, who were full of the modes of passion and ignorance. Thus you delivered Vedic knowledge to Lord Brahma. For this reason, all the great saints accept your forms as transcendental, untinged by material qualities. Hayagriva in the list of incarnations in Canto 2 is also mentioned. Same idea. You appeared as Hayagriva in this slightly different, but in the sacrifice of Lord Brahma, golden in hue, personification of sacrifices. He breathed all the sweet sounds of the Vedic hymns coming out of his nostrils. So there's different Hayagrivas in different yugas, or different cycles of the yugas. So slight variations on the pastime, but a form of the Supreme Lord, and Jambavan at least was there for this present situation. Prabhupada speaks of the killing of Madhu and Kaitaba in this way for his disciples. When we practice devotional service, the modes of nature, this Madhu and Kaitaba indicate the mode of passion, Madhu and Kaitaba the mode of ignorance. They arise from those modes, and when one engages in devotional service, those are obstacles, the modes of nature, but Krishna will protect the devotee from those modes of nature. They just stay faithful to Krishna, and you'll be protected from the modes of nature, just as Lord Brahma was protected, or the Vedas were protected. The personality of God will take care of annihilating if those modes of nature and their influence, if one stays faithful to the process of bhakti. In Jiva Goswami's Vidagdha Madhava, becoming a little familiar with those terms, Vidagdha Madhava and Lalita Madhava. Lalita Madhava is Krishna's pastimes outside of Vrindavan, beginning in Dwaraka. And Vidagdha Madhava is Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. So he mentions this Madhusudana pastime in Vidagdha Madhava, that Radha and Krishna were seated together. Many of you have heard this pastime, where they're seated together, enjoying pastimes together, and bumblebees are flying around the garland of Radha, and she seems disturbed by the bumblebees. So Krishna turns to Madhu Mangal and says, Madhu, get rid of the bees. And the word for bee, as well as the word for honey, is sometimes Madhu. So sometime later, Madhu Mangal chanting some celebrated mantras, the bees are gone, and he comes back and tells Krishna, mission accomplished. Madhu is gone. And Radharani heard, Madhu is gone. And for her, Madhu is Krishna. He's Madhu. Madhu is gone, and she began crying ecstatic tears of separation from Krishna. And Krishna tried to pacify Radharani. This is Vadagda Madhava. Tried to pacify Radharani. No, I'm right here. Everything's okay. He was referring to the bee Madhu, not me Madhu. But Radharani was so much absorbed in this mood of feelings of separation that Krishna then began to cry. Sympathetic tears of love for the feelings of Radharani, appreciating how deep was her love for him. And their tears filled the whole lake. Prem Sarovar. Vidagdha Madhava. Rupa Goswami. Most known about Jambavan is because of the extent that the Ramayana is recorded and mentions Jambavan again and again and again, as Jambavan as Lord Ramachandra's servant. So much so he's considered his eternal servant. Even when he meets Krishna, he realizes this is your Ram, although you go by the name Krishna. That was his spirit, his mood of devotion. So, his name comes as amongst the groups of monkey warriors that were searching for Sita. Some went south. Of course, Hanuman and Angada were in that group, as was Jambavan. And they searched and searched, and they had a certain amount of time to get back and report to Ram what they had found. They come to the edge of a cave. They go into the cave, and all of a sudden it becomes like another world inside the cave. I wouldn't expect that down in this cave here. Some ascetic lady comes, kind of a mystical personality. They ask who she is, Swayambha, Swayamprabha. And they ask her many questions. Who are you? Where are we? What's going on? She just gives answers to that. They want to, they tell their mission. The whole story of her mind is told again. They're searching for Sita. Can you tell us how to find Sita? Can you take us out of this cave? So she mystically takes them out of the cave, and they're at the mouth of the cave. She points in different directions and says, you'll find Sita that way. But they're at the edge of the ocean now. And so the nearest thing is so far away. So Angada decides to give up his life. He can't face going back and tell Ram I was a failure. They try to talk him out of it. He doesn't agree. He lies down, decides he's going to fast until death. Some other monkey warriors decide to join him. And seen from a distance with very good eyesight is Sampati, a vulture. And he thinks, yummy. My meal has come to me. I don't even have to go find a meal. And my wings are so old I can't go anywhere anyway. So they begin speaking. Angada speaks about this vulture is ready to devour us. Just see how providence is ready to accept our submission to death. And just see how kind Jatayu was trying to save Ram, or save Sita from being kidnapped by Ravana. And hearing the name Jatayu, Sampati then asks, what do you know about Jatayu? And they tell the whole story of Jatayu. That's my brother. Jatayu is my brother. He gave his life to save Ram. And so they say, well, do you know where Sita is? So he had this special capacity to see things far away, and he gave a description of where Sita was. And then they have this discussion, well, who's going to go find Sita and just make sure and tell her not to give up her life because Ram's coming soon? And, this monkey, that monkey can only jump a certain distance. And then Jambavan speaks about the life of Hanuman, because of time, we'll make it short. Because Hanuman, as the son of Vayu, has the capacity to go any distances. And the others, Jambavan gave description of how during the life of the presence of Vamana on earth, I traversed the earth 8 times. What to speak of cross over to that island. But I'm so much older now, I don't have the capacity. But I know one that does. This Hanuman, he has the capacity. He's the son of Vayu, and gives it, like, biography of Hanuman's life. Keshari was the mother's name. Mother's name was a resident of the heavenly planets. And a rishi cursed her that she should take birth on earth. She took birth on earth and became the wife. Anjana was his mother's name. Anjana. Anjana was one time walking along a mountaintop. The wind came, Vayu came, saw her beauty, and without any physical contact, she became pregnant. She was angry, and he said, I haven't violated you, so you shouldn't be angry. A great son will be born. The great son was born within the caves of a mountain, and Hanuman, young boy, seeing the glowing sun in the sky, thought it was a fruit. He went to reach the fruit and was zooming towards the fruit. Indra became nervous. Sent a thunderbolt, knocked Hanuman, who fell to the ground. So he was given this benediction: you won't remember your power until someone reminds you. So you won't have a problem like this again. So Jambavan knew the whole history and started reminding Hanuman and all the strength and of Hanuman started restoring, and his size grew and grew, and he went, and on Jambavan's advice went, found Sita, rescued Sita. Then there's a number of other episodes during the battle itself. Jambavan takes a role of killing different of Ravana's soldiers. One of the first waves of attacks that come out of the palace, Jambavan takes a huge rock, throws a huge rock, and crushes one of the great generals in the chest with a rock. Anyway, back and forth. Ravana comes out of the palace, starts fighting. Ram wants to fight. Lakshman says, let me go first. Hanuman gets impatient. He goes and smashes him in the chest. And Ravana hits Hanuman, and Hanuman is knocked unconscious for some time. Then he goes after Lakshman. Lakshman isn't able to defeat him, but Ravana isn't able to defeat Lakshman. He hurls a Brahma lance at Lakshman that knocks Lakshman down. So Ravana is feeling, encouraged. Hanuman sees this happen. He becomes very angry, furiously pummels Ravana in the chest and knocks him down unconscious. Then Lakshman and Ravana become conscious again. Boys love these stories of fights. I'm just giving highlights and what to speak of all the details. Ram and Ravana begin a battle. Ram destroying all the weapons that Ravana tosses at him. Finally, he picks up an effulgent arrow and hits Ravana in the chest, and Ravana falls to the ground. Rather than killing him, Ram says, you can go back to the palace now. You did a good job. Go take some rest. We'll see you again tomorrow. Ravan arranges for Kumbhakarna to be wakened. Kumbhakarna gives his speech to Ravan, saying, you're sinful. You're going to be destroyed. The whole dynasty is going to be destroyed. But I'm your brother, and I'll fight with you. So he comes roaring out into the battlefield. He requests specifically to fight with Ram. So Ram comes forward, and they have their battle with different arrows. This arm, that arm, his 2 feet, hobbling along with just his big mouth. He tries to swallow Ram, who then pierces his mouth with arrows so he can't even open his big mouth. Then, with another arrow, his head is severed. And when Kumbhakarna is knocked dead into the sea, Ravana becomes despondent. But the sons of Ravana say, Dad, we'll go out there and do it for you. We're good. We have mystic powers. We'll take care of this monkey horde. Don't worry. So they come rushing out of the palace, and one by one they're killed. Long narration. Hanuman particularly is adept. There's a Vibhishan describes the mystic power to Ram. He describes the mystic power of one of his sons, Atikaya. And Atikaya had his head severed from his body. So Indrajit, last hope, he says, I'll take care of the whole thing. And Indrajit's fighting capacity is not like the other ones. He's really good. And many monkey warriors, including Jambavan, are knocked down. Hanuman is not knocked down, but so many other warriors. And then he begins attacking Lakshman and Ram in some invisible position. And Ram suggests to Lakshman, let's just pretend that we got knocked out, so he'll leave the battlefield and we can regroup. Night falls. Indrajit goes back into the palace, celebrating. And Hanuman and Vibhishan go around with a torch at night to see who's still alive and who they can gather together for the army for the next morning. They find Jambavan, and he's not dead, but he's on the ground. And they ask Jambavan, are you alive? And Jambavan's answer is Hanuman alive? And Vibhishan says, why are you asking if Hanuman's alive? What about Ram and Lakshman? Why don't you ask if they're alive? They're the ones we're fighting for. And Jambavan's reply is, if Hanuman's alive, everyone can become victorious. That's why I asked. And then he calls Hanuman to come and gives him the indication of how to revive everybody with certain herbs to be found at the Rishabh mountain, describes the herbs. Off he goes, can't find the herbs, brings back the mountain. Jambavan personally administers the herbs. Of course, different versions of Ramayana tell it slightly differently, but Jambavan knows which herbs and administers the herbs, and immediately Ram and Lakshman are revived. And the other ones that even were dead, they come back to life. Pretty powerful herbs. Wouldn't you like that, Doctor? And then Hanuman took the mountain back, and it all took one day, according to one particular version of Ramayana. And then another situation where he's similarly advising, get the mountain again. So the cave, Jambavan taking part in Krishna's pastimes, is specific with his cave and Jamabavathi and the Shamataka jewel, which we heard different versions of. Something that's, in reading Rupa Goswami's description from Lalita Madhava, I found it particularly interesting that when Jambavan heard of this leaping of one girl, Lalita, from Govardhan Hill, he confirmed and said, yes, it's true. Under the advice of the sun god, I had gone to Govardhan Hill to engage in austerities, and while I was there, I saw this girl flying through the air, and I caught her before she hit the ground. And I guess that's Lalita, although I called her Jamabavathi. Now, interestingly, very interestingly, Jiva Goswami, that's Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami narrates it slightly differently, more than slightly differently. And Garga Samhita narrates it also significantly differently. In Garga Samhita, it describes that Jambavati was the daughter of Jambavan during the time of Ram, and Jambavan wanted Jambavati to marry Ram, and Ram said, no, I have taken a vow of only one wife. But in the next yuga, I can say yes as Krishna, because I'll accept more than one wife. And then there's another version, the Gopal Champu version. And so those differences of versions can be different explanations, can be different days of Brahma, just like many of you have been to Vrindavan, and one of the places you go to Vrindavan is the birthplace of Radharani in Raval. And when you hear the birth of Srimati Radharani, there's different versions, because there's different days of Brahma in which Krishna and Radha appear in Vrindavan. So these different, that's one explanation. There can be such differences for those reasons. But something that they all share is there was a cave. So the place, this is a long distance, the place where Krishna with the elders of Dwaraka were searching for Prasena and the Shamataka jewel, eventually led them to here. Now, it's a good thing Krishna is omniscient, because it might have taken a long time to find this place out of wherever else he might go looking. I can't find right now the Gopal Champu version. In any case, so that's the description that I was prepared to give here for Jambavan's cave. There's a bhajan that was scheduled to be sung when we were at Porbandar. I think now would be a good time to do that, but I'll also just mention, so you can get ready. I'll just mention that we have constraints of circumstance. My understanding of the logistics is, from where we are now to the next place that we're going, it takes 3 hours. And the group that was doing the Qatar are going to start up again at 3 o'clock. And if we can't have lunch sent another 3 hours away from here. We just had breakfast. And it looks like we're going to have lunch before we leave here, because we can't have it at the next place. Unless you want to take it with you or something like that. Anyway, so we may have to have lunch here at 3 o'clock or whenever, and then go to the place that we're going to next, have darshan, not have kata because it'll be dark by the time we get there, and then continue to where we're going to spend the night. And then have kata about the place we didn't have kata this evening, tomorrow. You with me? Or I can speak about that place here before we go to have darshan. Maybe that's what we'll do. So for now, bhajan. And she needs the microphone.